Hi guys, some of you have asked to see some examples of what the Google Slides might look like for this presentation, and normally I don't show examples because I don't want you to just completely copy what they're doing, not in ideas, but I want you to be super creative, and sometimes I feel like examples stifles that creativity. But because we're kind of in special circumstances where it's a little bit harder to ask me for advice, and because we're not all doing the same book for this project like I normally would, I am going to show you some of these examples. So in the past, this is a group assignment and it's all done on House of the Scorpion or another class novel that we're doing. So the examples I'm going to show you are for House of the Scorpion. So this example is from last year and it is a musical version of House of the Scorpion. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. So usually each presentation started with their log line, and in the lesson that you'll learn, that is the elevator pitch or the very quick synopsis when you're if you were presenting to an executive. So Mateo Alacran, the clone of the wealthy drug lord El Patron, struggles to find his identity and the sinister meaning behind his existence. So normally this is a dystopian novel, so they have turned it into a musical. And they decided to do completely original songs, and some of them were performed, but unfortunately I don't have the video for that. So one of the songs that they came up with is called Angels and Idiots, and that would be one of them, two of the main characters, Tam Lin and Matt, who's our protagonist. It's a time lapse, so it kind of goes across time. So this is so more of a montage. Tam Lin coaches Matt on what it means to be an adult, because Tam Lin is kind of his mentor throughout the book. Tam Lin and El Patron take turns singing to Matt, one at the Oasis and one at the hospital, and Matt is conflicted as to which father figure is correct, because El Patron is kind of the evil figure in this, even though it is technically his father, whereas Tam Lin is much more trustworthy. Okay, another song that they came up with, or another song idea, would be Brother Wolf. This is Maria. She's kind of the love interest, but more of a friend. Maria and Matt slow dance when she comes back from the convent. Maria explains that Matt has a soul just like any other person, because Matt is a clone, so many people within the world of this book think that clones don't have souls and that they're not real people. So they are often just created either as slaves, so their brains are destroyed in the beginning, or the parts where they can really make decisions on their own, or they're seen as organ harvesters, where you can just someone would create a clone just to harvest the organs. Yeah, let's go ahead and go to the next song. It's hard, but it's fair. So this is a recurring line when you get to this section of the book. This is kind of, when Matt has to go to a work camp. This is what the people in charge continue to say to the boys. So the keepers, that's what they're called, are singing it to the boys, and the key lyrics would be five-legged horse, which is a metaphor that the keepers use a lot. And that line, it's hard, but it's fair. And then they sing the 5 principles of right-mindedness, which is also in the book. And then there later is a reprise of It's Hard, But It's Fair. So that's when the same melody, but much shorter and maybe has a different tone, is used later in a musical. When the boys lock the keepers in their rooms with only salt to eat and toilet water to drink, which also happens in the book. And then we have our another song, El Baile de los Muertos, and it translates to the Dance of the Dead. And it's sung by Fidelito, who's a character that comes up towards the end, sings it about his grandmother. All dance when people dress like skeletons, and Matt sees someone that looks like Celia and becomes sad. So Celia is the mother figure in the beginning of the book. That's who raises Matt. And then another song, In a House of Scorpions, Celia tells Matt her story and also tells Matt the story of Felicia and Mr. McGregor. Celia and Tam Lin explain the way El Patron doesn't let go of anyone or anything. And this is the theme song of the entire movie, and it has at least 4 reprises. So when Celia sings to Matt, when Maria sings about her mother, when Matt sings about Esperanza, and then Celia singing to Matt about Tam Lin's death. Now, when they actually presented this project, they had costumed themed boards. So they had swatches of fabric and color inspiration boards for what the costumes would look like. So they didn't actually design the costumes, but they had a board where they kind of designed the costumes. And here are the scene changes. So because it's a musical, the higher percentage of the storyline is written throughout the dialogue and or sung, so rather than the regular dialogue in the book. Then they also decided to combine some characters or remove them. So Mr. Ortega is combined with Daft Donald. Willem is nameless and so not as developed as much in the book. Luna and the teacher. And so they would have gone in and explained whether or not they're cutting out these characters or they're combining them together. So I'm assuming, if I remember correctly, that Luna and the teacher, because they're smaller chapters, would just be completely eliminated from the musical. They would develop Tamlin and Celia's relationship a little bit more because there is a hint of romance, but it's not really addressed in the book. And then also developing Maria and Matt into more of a romance because it's not as developed in the book either. And here are the deleted scenes they chose to use. So in the beginning, the audience doesn't know that Matt is a clone. So it's similar to how Matt doesn't until it's explained to him. And then the teacher is also going to be deleted. So Tamlin is the one who entices Matt to speak rather than the teacher. So that way you can just eliminate that character. And then there's a long scene about what are called the Egypt pens. The Egypts are the slaves or the clones that have no free will. And this is important, but not as important as seeing the Egypt die in the fields of McGregor or McGregor's clone. So they're just going to eliminate that scene and then put the information about the Egypts in the other two scenes. And then they also included some statistics. So the runtime would be 2 hours to 2.5 hours. They wanted this to be a movie musical, so Universal Studios would develop it. They decided it would be PG-13 based on violence and content. You do not have to include a budget, so you can just ignore that part. And then where they wanted it primarily filmed. And then they made some of their casting choices. I would encourage you to include pictures because if you don't know who some of these people are, then seeing the name is not as helpful to you. So I would encourage you to do some pictures. And so that's what they did throughout their slides. So here's who they chose to do. And they had a trailer and soundtrack clip. It's not included in this presentation, so I can't show it to you. But that's what they chose to include as well because, again, they weren't in a pandemic and they could actually meet up at each other's houses. Okay, the next one I wanted to show you is a TV show adapted from the same book. So their show would be called Clone. We're going to skip over their trailer. And here's their synopsis or what it would have been about. Clone is a serial drama TV show, so that means the storyline repeats every week rather than it being a whole new episode, or rather than it being a whole new story each week. About a boy named Matt who all his life had enjoyed the safety of his home, the love from his mother Celia, and the company of his best friend Mac. However, all of this changes when Mac wants to join 3 kids walking outside. They are taken to a big house where Matt is separated from his friend. After a long struggle in a lonely dungeon, he is cast into a world of money, drugs, and power. He quickly finds out that no one is as they seem while he tries to find answers. What he doesn't know is that all these answers can be summarized in one word: clone. Something that I would have questioned them about, because there was a question answer period, is that I think creating a best friend named Mac when your main character's name is Matt is going to confuse people in the beginning because those names sound so similar. So there's no point in making the names similar unless it has some other purpose. So how is the TV show different from the book? McGregor's clone, or Mac, again, I would encourage a name change, has not had his brain destroyed and is raised with Matt and Celia until they are separated in the dungeons. Matt is told that Mac is taken away by the chupacabras when he actually was harvested. Tom says he knows where Mac is and where they go to the hospital and see him brain dead, screaming, and strapped to a table. This is when Matt discovers his fate, but he still believes El Patron would never do this to him. So in the book, McGregor's clone is named Tom, and he is really mean and terrible. And the clone that they take him to, because McGregor has multiple clones where he harvests organs, is not someone that they're friends with. So that is a big change. Then they also included similar popular titles, which I think is great. So if you're making a movie or musical, you'd want to have similar things that people would like, and that would help us get a feel for the tone that you're trying to create as well. So their similar popular titles for family drama would be Downton Abbey, This Is Us, and All American. And then for dystopian, Altered Carbon, Dollhouse, Orphan Black, and The 100. So saying it's Downton Abbey meets Orphan Black or meets Dollhouse would be very intriguing for people who are familiar with both, because those shows are totally different. Their target demographic, or who they think will watch the show, would be 14 and up. Here's their casting list, which again, it's always best to include pictures. You do not have to cast every single character in the book. I think some groups chose to do that, but I think it's just as fine just to do the main characters, especially because not everyone's going to be familiar with your book. So just doing the main characters is fine. Then why will people like our show? So it's targeted towards teens. Their show's full of drama, action, and tragedy. Typical CW TV series with a dystopian twist. So they explain why it's really, why other people would like it. So I think that's another important slide to have. And then because they filmed part of their TV show, they decided to film it at their house, so they included a picture of that set. Another example I wanted to show you is an example of another TV show, and they decided to call their show The Den of the Cobra. So their logline, Matt the clone of the powerful drug lord El Patron struggles to fit in with the rest of the Alacrane family. As he learns more of the family's secrets, he is persecuted and must make a life-altering decision. It's a mixture of love, death, plankton, and persecution. This show, worthy of production, will keep you on the edge of your seat. We have an amazing cast of characters that works together to produce a magnificent rendition of Nancy Farmer's classic, The House of the Scorpion. So they list out their cast of characters, the main cast and the supporting cast. Then they have pictures of those characters. Then they also decided to include some statistics of why people will watch their show. So the graphs are a little bit small to see on this screen, but it would have been projected on my main screen, so it would have been easier to see. So men averaged about 3 hours per day watching TV, and women averaged 2 hours and 34 minutes per day. And then the Nielsen report, which is what collects all the data of what shows people are watching and how those shows are popular. So if you want to research statistics of how often people watch certain shows, you'll want to look up Nielsen reports. So according to a Nielsen report, U.S. Adults are watching 5 hours and 4 minutes of television per day on average. And then Howlow would have said, based on these statistics, we know that a lot of people watch TV. With all the people online, somebody is bound to watch The Den of the Cobra. Many people watch TV, so many people will watch this show. So you might want to look up some statistics as well. Then they also decided to do a survey of the class of who would be interested in seeing their favorite book turned into a movie or a TV show. So that was helpful data too, just from their class. And then what I think is actually really great is that they came up with show details for the different seasons. So they wanted this to be a Netflix series. So they wanted 5 seasons. So it's just a mini series rather than something that goes on forever. For the 5 parts of the book, and each episode is based on chapters. So they broke it down by chapter. And then here are the major changes that they decided to make. So they changed specific scenes. So let's see. In their first scene, Matt discovers the oasis first. He later shows Tam Lin because he trusts him. This builds their trust in a more effective way than the story, as Matt is sharing something personal rather than Tam Lin telling cryptic stories. Also, since Tam Lin will be the only one who knows about the space, Matt will know the trunk left there was from Tam Lin. So those are the changes that they're making and their justifications. Another scene they changed is Matt teaches himself to play piano as no one will teach him, using the room with music sheets. He finds Mr. Ortega one day while playing the piano and secretly lets him help him with the piano so that Mr. Ortega won't be turned into an Egypt. So that's not how it happens in the original. This shows Matt conquering the discrimination he is faced with by not quitting his passion and becoming just as good, if not better than natural-born humans. This also gives him the discovery of the storage room without leaving it to chance during the dire situation in the book. When Matt helps Mr. Ortega, he's also showing he can rise above the discrimination and be a better person than his peers. So their changes are really purposeful to help develop Matt as a character, whereas in the book, Matt's kind of all over the place. And let's see, their top bullet point says, we took out some of the characters with lesser roles or didn't contribute to the climax plot as much. So they took out Benito, Fanny, a farm patrolman, and El Guapo. And then they ended with their final slide, and I'm sure they talked about why they should be picked as the one that gets funding. So I hope that these examples were helpful to you when you go to make your own. I will post the Google Slides template in a few weeks. So you don't need to worry about making the slides right now. It's just that some people wanted to see some examples of what I'm looking for.